Welcome to the Happier and Healthier podcast. I'm your host, Maria Marlowe, and this is a place where we don't rely on good luck or good genes for our health and happiness, but rather we create it with our thoughts and our actions each and every single day. Each week, I'll bring you a thought or a guest that will help you live your happiest and healthiest life. Are you ready? Welcome back to the Happier and Healthier podcast. Today, I'm joined by Michelle Tam, who is better known as the co-creator of the uber popular blog Nom Nom Paleo, and she also happens to be a two-time New York Times bestselling cookbook author. She's also a working mom and a self-professed food nerd. She has a pretty interesting history, which we'll talk about a little bit in the interview. But in a nutshell, she has a degree in nutrition and food science, as well as a doctorate in pharmacy. And for over 12 years, she worked the graveyard shift as the night pharmacist at Stanford Hospital. And she turned it all around, and now she is blogging and working on Nom Nom Paleo full time. She's got an incredible story. She's so sweet, so kind, and I'm excited to have her here today. Michelle, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Oh, I'm so excited. Thanks for having me.
Of course, you're like the paleo food blogger queen here. So I'm excited to share your insights. And to start off, I'm curious because you are known for Nom Nom Paleo and being a paleo blogger. And I think when most people think of paleo, they immediately think of cavemen and tons of meat. But your version of paleo is a little bit different. It's definitely more plant-based. So tell us a little bit about your version of paleo.
Well, I think I'm probably the least hardcore paleo person out there. And so my approach is that it's an ancestral way of eating that prioritizes eating real, whole, nutrient-dense foods that are more healthful than harmful. So it's very generic because I think people need to figure out for themselves how to eat as broadly and as healthfully as possible. And everybody is different. Everybody's a unique snowflake. And I think that it needs to be, you need to find something that's like a long-term lifestyle change, and it has to be sustainable and delicious. So I'm not going to say you have to eat this, this, and this. And, I suggest things, but you can totally make my recipes and eat it with some bread or whatever makes you happy.
Totally. I so agree that there's not one perfect way of eating, but rather, in general, we want to all aim for a whole food, real food, plant-based diet. And then in terms of the nitty-gritty details, that's going to be a little bit different for each of us. So I love that you said that.
Yeah. And I would have no fun at all if I'm always counting and weighing and I'm just denying myself all of these foods that I really love to eat just because, there's this dietary dogma that says this is not okay. I think that's why paleo was so, when I first discovered it and I tried it and I felt so great, that was the whole thing. I was like, oh my gosh, everything that I've been taught all this time is not true. When I eat real foods, I feel so much better. And so I think just going with that is how people should kind of approach how they eat. Not just following what someone says is good for you, but actually experimenting on yourself and seeing what things do, feel good for you and don't. And actually, being mindful of that instead of ignoring it.
Right. Mindfulness is key and experimentation is key because that really is how we figure out what works best for our own bodies. And I think we also just get so used to feeling a certain way or having certain ailments, whether it's just, a rash or sneezing often or digestive issues. And we just think it's normal instead of poking a little bit deeper and seeing if we could figure out, okay, is something that I'm eating or doing triggering this response? Personally, I had really bad acne, I was overweight, I was sick all the time, so I had all these issues, but I honestly just thought they were normal and that everybody had these issues. But once I really discovered the whole food as medicine concept and decided to change my diet, that's when sort of light bulbs started going off and I realized, okay, what I'm eating does affect these things. So I'm curious, what prompted you to try the paleo diet and what results did you see?
So I have a nutrition degree from the 90s, and way back in the early 90s it was all about like eating no fat, like no saturated fat, like whole grains, like basically a super carb heavy, mostly vegetarian diet with no fat. And I was like, oh, this is what I've been taught is healthy. This is what they teach people to eat in the hospitals. And so I did that, but I felt terrible. But I kind of, and I had like my whole life, I had all of this kind of GI upset and I had achy joints. And I would like fall asleep right after I ate lunch. But I explained everything away by kind of stuff that I'd been taught because this is what is healthy. So I used to think that, all my GI stuff was just because I was getting food poisoning all the time. And in my food microbiology class, I learned, well, it's a dose response thing. So even though I might be eating the exact same thing my husband's eating, like I'm just way more sensitive and I just need a little bit of whatever it is. And so in my mind, like there's just terrible restaurant hygiene everywhere, which is not true. And I thought like my aches and pains and all this joint stuff for falling asleep all the time was just because I was getting older and I was just so busy. But then when I tried paleo and I started eating like whole foods, and I just started feeling so much better, and all of my GI stuff went away. I had so much more energy. My joint pain went away. And so it literally felt like I was living in the Matrix. I was like, how come nobody knows about this? And it just seems so basic. Like just eating real food is good for you. And I think it's crazy how I just totally discounted everything. And I just went by what people told me was healthy, or, what supposed experts were saying was healthy. So now I'm like, gosh, I'm just way more open-minded about things. Like stuff that I would have discounted as totally woo-woo and crazy. I'm like, maybe there is something to it. I obviously thought how I'm eating now was crazy.
It's so true. I think we all just get so used to not feeling good that we think it's normal. And it's not just us, it's everyone around us as well, right? So we don't think there's anything wrong and we don't realize we can change it. And I think it's so interesting that in our culture, we also, when we think of aging, we think of getting sick. And you look at other cultures and getting older means getting wiser. It doesn't mean getting sicker. So I really think that this perspective of aging equals getting worse or getting sicker really stops us or prevents us from digging deeper and even trying to prevent these things from happening, because we almost feel helpless, like it's inevitable. But really, there's really so much we can do with our diet and our lifestyle to change that.
Right. No, I totally agree. And I think it's funny because I think when you first start anything, like, if you turn vegan or paleo or start CrossFit, like you feel like you've discovered something amazing and you want to tell everyone, but then you become super annoying. So you have to kind of take a step back and, say, no, this works for me. And I have the information if people want to ask me about it. But, if you start trumpeting about it and talking about it, like, people will start avoiding you.
That's so true. I think we all go through a phase though when we first change our diet, that is something that really works for us. We want to help everyone else and we end up being the food police. And, why are you eating this? Do you know what that's going to do to your body? And eventually you see your dinner invites start to decrease gradually. Everyone is on their own food journey and it comes at different times. No one's on the same track. And, there's just so much more to food than just fueling our body and quelling our hunger pains. It's also emotional and it brings back memories of people or places. And there's just such a bigger picture going on when it comes to food that, it's great just to be that resource that when someone is ready to change their diet, then you can provide the information. But until then, just letting people be and come to the decision on their own.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I discovered. I was like, well, I'll just put this on the internet. And so if someone wants to find it, they can find it.
Exactly. And there are apparently many, many people who have been searching for that information and who love your blog. And you even wrote 2 books. Your cookbook, Ready or Not, just recently came out. And one thing I found really interesting about the way that you broke the book down was based on people's readiness. So I thought that was quite interesting. Can you speak a little bit more to how you decided to break this cookbook down?
Yeah, so I think when our publisher was asking us to come up with an idea for book number two, she was like, oh, there's lots of different, like there are 30-minute meals, there are make ahead meals. Like, do you want to, do one of these things? And I was like, I don't know, because like, I feel like I'm all of these things on different days, right? And so I think that my husband and I, because Henry and I both work on Nom Nom Paleo. I mean, I think I'm the face, but he's the reason why people love it, because like he does the design and the cartoons and the photos. But I always approach, all of our projects as the consumer. And so I was like, well, I feel like I have different states of readiness. And so I want to be able to pick recipes depending on how much time I have and what I have in my pantry and in my fridge. And so that's why we decided to kind of break it up in terms of how ready you are. So we have a whole section on, whether when you're totally ready, these are things to get set. So you have like, sauces and dressings and things that you can have ready that you can quickly, do leftover makeovers or quick meals with things that just take a few minutes to prepare ahead of time. And then there are the not ready recipes where you have nothing ready, and you can throw things together in 45 minutes or less with what you have lying around. And then we have kind of stuff in the happy medium, which are kind of ready. So you've made one or two things ahead of time, but here are all these really cool ways to kind of make them over so your family won't complain about eating the same thing over and over again.
I love that because I think sometimes people think when it comes to healthy eating or batch cooking or meal prepping that you're basically just eating chicken and broccoli every single day, but it definitely doesn't have to be like that. And there are a lot of creative ways and easy ways that you can tweak your leftovers so that you are eating similar ingredients, but it doesn't taste the same. It tastes like a completely new meal.
Yeah. With picky kids, I always get feedback right away about why are we having this again? So I'm like, okay, let me transform this into a soup that looks nothing like what it was before. Or I will make these choose your own adventure egg muffins that look nothing like the stew we had the other day. Just so they're kind of tricked into thinking we're getting something new. But for me, it's just a quick and easy, meal change.
I love that. And speaking of kids, one of the most common complaints or questions I get is from parents who have picky eaters and they're wondering how can they get their kids to eat more healthfully. So what tips do you have for them?
So I think if you try to preach at them just like adults, they will be super duper duper resistant. So Henry and I, when we created our second book, and even with our first book, we actually secretly wanted it to appeal to kids. And so that's why there's tons and tons of bright, colors, and there's a photo for every single step, and there are cartoons and funny jokes and stuff, just because we want it so that parents can just leave, or grandparents or whoever can leave the book on the table and they will be attracted to like a bright, red cover or yellow cover. And then once they flip it open, they'll see all these like fun recipes. And it's kind of like a magic trick where it's like, oh, here you go from these raw ingredients and you follow these steps and presto, you have like a final dish. So I think we just want to like stealthily appeal to kids. And then like Henry and I, we just try to model, good eating habits, and whatever we serve at home is what they're going to be eating. Because I think when we first started, we kind of went paleo and we just kind of made the kids their separate meals. And it really was because we didn't want to have a fight, and we wanted the easy way out. But then one day, I think when we were cleaning up their leftovers, and the fact that I refused to eat their leftovers really got to me. And I was like, that's not okay that I'm serving stuff to my kids that I myself don't want to eat. And so that's when we're like, no, we're going to kind of get everybody on board. And so everything on our blog and in our cookbooks are things that have been tested on the whole family. And there is a little bit of compromise. Like, I think before I would make kind of all sorts of crazy stuff with like lots of spices or lots of like awful and weird stuff. But now it's like, oh, let's make more chicken and things that are more kind of family friendly and budget friendly too.
Totally. So when you first started making these changes though, did you get any pushback or did they go willingly?
Oh, totally. So they were 3 and 6 when we decided to do this. And people always ask, like, how do you, turn your kids pale? I'm like, you do it from the womb. If you do it before they even know there's anything different, there will be no pushback. But, when we did it at 3 and 6, there definitely was pushback. I mean, our older son is like a people pleaser. So he's like, oh, this is all wonderful. Like, whatever you make, Mom, is amazing. But then my younger son, like, no, I don't like this. Where is my mac and cheese and all this other stuff that you used to serve me that I love? And, when I go to parties, I want to eat that pizza. And so with him, we kind of did this little bridge where we came up with a meal that I was okay cooking because it wouldn't be a lot of extra time, and he was okay eating, and that was scrambled eggs and roasted broccoli. Because I'm totally okay with him eating that. And I was like, okay, if you want this 3 meals a day, this is what you're going to get. And eventually he got tired of it, and he just eats what we eat. And he still asserts his independence by being the slowest eater in the whole wide world. But he finishes it. And we do have a rule where everybody has to try what we're eating. And if he doesn't like it, then I can make him eggs. I mean, now I don't make him eggs anymore because I'm like, dude, I'm not a short order cook. But at the beginning, we did have that as kind of a backup.
That's wonderful because I know with kids, it can just be so hard to even get them to try anything. I know with my nephews, they literally will not even open their mouth, especially if it's green. And so that's great that you were able to kind of implement those changes and get them slowly but surely to actually like and want the healthy stuff. So I'm excited to bring my nephews actually the cookbook this weekend because it looks like a comic book. So I think it will pique their interest.
Yeah. And I mean, I think parents are like, no, I really want them to read this. Like, don't even push it on them. Just leave and say, hey, this is kind of this cool book that I picked up or I borrowed from the library, and just leave it. And don't even say, hey, pick out some meals from here. Just leave it. And they'll be like, wow, this looks good. Or this looks like it would be something fun to cook. And so I think it's also a great book. Like, if you have kids that are interested in cooking, great, because a lot of them, especially if they're tweens, they can probably cook it from, the first step till the end product. But even younger kids, you can have them like point out, like, what step are we on now? And does this look like, are we on the right track? Does it look like the picture? Without it being this really heavy thing that you have to do.
Right, without forcing them, just letting them decide that they want to do it on their own.
Yeah.
Really smart. So something else that stood out to me about the cookbook was that you have over 150 recipes, yet you have literally just a small handful of dessert or sweet recipes. Personally, I think reducing or eliminating sugar, especially refined sugar, is probably one of the top or the healthiest things that we could do for ourselves. And I know a lot of people come to me in disbelief at the idea or the thought of completely cutting sugar out or cutting refined sugar out. But I always try to assure them that it is possible. If you're eating a whole food, well-balanced diet, your sugar cravings actually decrease. So I'm curious what your experience has been. Did you find that when you switched to paleo that you had less sugar cravings or you didn't want sugar anymore?
So I love sweets. And so in this book and in our first book, I literally have maybe 5 dessert recipes. For many reasons, but one of them is like I test recipes over and over and over again. And if I'm testing a bunch of dessert recipes, like that's just totally terrible for me. But in my first book, I actually have a whole section where I have my dessert recipes. There are 5 of them. And the next page, I'm like, what? That's it? There are no more desserts? And I explain why I don't have them. And it's because I've loved sweets my whole life. And sugar has a hold on me that, once I start eating sweets, even if they're paleofied and I'm using like honey or maple syrup or coconut sugar, like once I start eating sweets, I just start craving them and I just kind of can't stop. And so I think when I went paleo and I kind of did like a 30-day reset where I ate like no sugar, like I actually did stop craving it. And my taste buds recalibrated. And so things aren't as sweet anymore, or like things are really sweet. Whereas before, like I would have to add sugar to strawberries and all sorts of stuff because they weren't sweet enough. And chocolate that was like 60% was like not sweet at all to me. But now like an 85 or 90% cacao chocolate is just perfect. So I think I used to eat all of these foods that were engineered by the flavor industry to make them hyper palatable. So I think just kind of staying away from those kind of things is better for me because I don't have control. I mean, I have like my husband can have one bite of dessert and he's like, oh, that's it. And I'm like, no, you can't do this to me. We're supposed to share this. Now I'm going to eat 95% of it. Like, this is not okay. Because with sweets, it's like a food without breaks.
Yeah, I think it's that way for a lot of people. And it is interesting because I do feel men are always kind of like, dessert, I could take it or leave it. But women, I mean, I know myself, it's like, okay, no, I want to eat the entire thing.
Yeah, I lick the plate. So that like, I can't. But my kryptonite are raw vegan desserts. I can have some, but even those I have to cut it off.
Yeah, I also used to eat sugar out the wazoo from morning, noon, and night. I would literally eat a dessert as a meal. But I did find that when I switched to a more real food way of eating and eating plenty of dark leafy greens and vegetables and healthy fats and protein, that my sugar cravings substantially decreased. But that being said, if I did have something sweet, like one of those raw vegan desserts, and once that coconut sugar hits your tongue, then all of a sudden, you just want more and more and more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I try not to bring it home. Like if I'm out eating, I'm like, oh, I'm going to order all this stuff, but I try not to bring it home.
Yeah, same. Out of sight, out of mind. If it's not in my kitchen pantry, then I don't have to worry about it being devoured. So another part of the book that I really liked is the quick recipes that are ready in 45 minutes or less. And I think all of us are busy, we're hectic, we have a lot going on. What tips do you have for people who don't have a lot of time but still want to eat healthy? What can they do?
So I think there's nothing wrong with buying kind of pre-washed, pre-cut vegetables because I think that is a total time saver. So my fridge has tons of like pre-washed salad greens. I have all this frozen vegetables that I can throw into things really quickly. And I also have like ground meat a lot just because that's fast, quick, and cheap. And so I can throw both of those things together and make a quick stir fry really fast and it's delicious. And I have an all-purpose stir fry sauce that's in my cookbook that literally takes probably 2 minutes to throw together in a mason jar. And then it keeps for like 2 weeks. And then you can use that in a million different ways. So even if you don't like stir fry, you can use it as a salad dressing. You can make paper wrapped chicken and bake those with that stir fry sauce. Or you can use it like in your Instant Pot as the base for any type of stew that you're making. So it's just a super versatile sauce. So I think pre-cut veggies, either frozen or fresh, are great. And then like ground meat is a quick and easy thing to cook.
Yes, I totally agree. I think getting as much help as you can from the grocery store with pre-cut, pre-chopped, pre-washed veggies, and even you mentioned the frozen veggies, which I think are great. These are all really good options, especially when you're pressed for time. And one thing that I think people don't realize with the frozen veggies in particular is that they're actually just as nutritious, if not more so, than fresh. Especially here on the East Coast, most of our produce is shipped in from the West Coast, and it's picked before it's ripe, and it's, travels for weeks in a truck, and then it's stored in a warehouse, and 2 weeks later or more, that's when it's ending up at the grocery store, and it's not actually as nutritious as some of the frozen food that is going to be flash frozen at peak ripeness and peak nutrition.
And it's right there waiting for you. Like you can have it in there for months and it's already cut and washed and you just dump it into things.
Exactly. And especially if you travel a lot for work or whatever, having frozen produce on hand is just such a great way to make sure that you don't succumb to bad takeout, because you could quickly heat it up. You can add it if you have a few other staples in your pantry, like let's say a chickpea pasta or beans. You could easily whip together a great healthy meal.
Yeah, and there's certain frozen vegetables that I actually prefer to fresh in a time crunch. Like I think like frozen kale, I love because it's so fast and easy. Whereas if you have fresh kale, it can take longer to cook and you're like, I have to, wash it and do all this stuff. But the frozen kale, like it's like perfect in like stews or a quick stir fry.
That's a good tip. I actually haven't used frozen kale before, but I'll definitely have to try that because it takes me forever to triple wash it.
Yeah, I love it.
So speaking of time saving, I'm sure you're a pro at this because I know that now you are working on Nom Nom Paleo full time, but up until relatively recently, you were actually working a 70-hour work week as a pharmacist at a hospital and that on the graveyard shift, while also raising a family, 2 kids, running this blog. You put out a New York Times bestselling cookbook. So how did you manage to juggle it all and stay sane and stay healthy at this time?
I think initially when I went paleo, like because I felt so much better, like I think it probably made me work nights longer than I would have because I was like, oh my gosh, suddenly I have all this energy and I feel so much better and stronger. Um, but then I think when, because I was blogging and then we had our cookbook and then I was like touring on my off week. So it did get pretty crazy. So I'm not going to say that I was super healthy at that point because eventually I had to quit my job. But we have a lot of support. Like my husband is really great, is a really great dad and a really great partner. And he's super supportive. Like we're super lucky in that we have grandparents that live nearby. And I also stopped watching TV. Like that used to be such a time suck. But I think once we started doing this, I found out I had a lot more free time when I stopped watching, every Housewives franchise on Bravo. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a matter of balance. Like I'm a big homebody as evidenced by our cookbooks because it's all filmed and shot in our home. And so I, I just prioritize the things that were really important to me. And that's like family and friends and, hanging out at home and not watching TV.
Yeah, TV is such a major time suck, and I stopped watching it years ago as well. And I realized, oh my God, I actually have so many hours in my day.
Yeah. No, and when I'm on like a flight and I get to watch like satellite TV, I'm like, oh, I've missed this. But like, but at the same time, like, oh, like if I'm on a flight cross country and I have like 5 hours of satellite TV, I'm like, okay, I'm good, I think, for a few months.
Right, you get your fill.
Yeah.
All right, so back to when you first started. How did you just even manage your time? This is something that fascinates me, is how people manage their time. Were you following some sort of schedule? Because doing the night shift and kids and a blog, like that's a lot to manage. Or were you just sort of winging it and fitting in work whenever you can and fitting in projects as they came up?
No, when I worked nights, it was super strict. And I even have a blog post on my on Nom Nom Paleo called Surviving the Night Shift, which is actually kind of telling in that I titled it Surviving the Night Shift. Because you do need to survive the night shift. I mean, there's a higher incidence of obesity and cancer and chronic disease and all this stuff. But at the same time, I chose to work nights because it afforded me a week off every other week. So there's pluses and minuses. But when I work nights, like I had to be asleep by the certain time. Like my bedroom was completely black. Like when I drive home from work in the morning, I had to have, those old lady glasses that kind of blocked out the sunlight. I was up by this time when I was at work. I, packed all my lunches and I ate at certain times. So I had a very, very strict schedule, only because if I didn't adhere to that, it would be bad news. Because it's tough. It's tough working nights.
Of course, of course. I mean, I can only imagine. And I'm sure that having that set routine and set schedule really did help you survive, as you said. So I think people even that aren't maybe working a night shift, but that do have a hectic and busy schedule, the takeaway is that getting into some sort of routine can really help you be more efficient and more productive and get whatever you need to get done, done.
Yeah, but even now, like I stopped. So I worked nights for 12 years and then I've stopped for like 2.5. And I do feel so much better not working nights, because I think I was in a constant state of jet lag. And my memory is much better. And it's funny because a lot of stuff, if it happened in the 12 years when I was working nights, I was like, I don't really remember it. And I think you just don't have great sleep. Like no matter what you try to do, trying to sleep during the day is tough.
So I'm glad that you're not working nights anymore, although I do know you're still a very busy, busy woman. You have a partnership with Whole Foods where I've been seeing these yellow signs and little cartoons all over the store with your favorite picks of your favorite brands, and also you even have your own line of food, like you have the this magic mushroom powder, which sounds absolutely amazing. I have to try. I know you also have the recipe on your site. But what's next? What do we have to look forward to from Nom Nom Paleo?
That's a really good question, because Henry and I don't have like an editorial calendar ever. Like literally we're like, oh, what are we going to put up this week? But we really, and because like he still has his full-time job, like we just do things that we love and we really want to put out there. And so that changes depending on what comes up. Like we created our podcast because I was like, oh, I love listening to podcasts. Let's do it. But then we realized just how much work it was, which I'm sure you realize now. But then when we created our books, we're like, we want our book to be this way. Like we want it to be like comic book form. We want a photo for every single step. But, that's not usual. But because I don't know. I mean, I think we just kind of come up with stuff that we are excited about. And when it hits, we just do it.
That's a good way to do it. Let everything come to you.
I mean, sometimes it's frustrating. I think our publisher is very frustrated when we're like, I don't know. And then boom, this is what we're going to do. But that's just how it's kind of worked for us.
Well, you're doing something right. All right. Last question is, if you can give our listeners just one tip or one piece of advice to live a happier and healthier life, what would that tip be?
So you would think that I would say something that was food related, but I think what I've discovered in my old age is that relationships matter. And that's actually probably the most important thing, that like the quality of your social connections is the biggest determinant of your health and happiness. And so I think it's really important to, invest your time and effort in making sure that your loved ones know how much you support and appreciate them. Because ultimately that's what, like Henry has a great grandmother who's like 96, 97. And she is just powered by her little tribe. Because she has a super strong family network and she eats like fish fillets all the time. And she's totally healthy, but it's because of the strength of her relationships.
That is so well said, and I definitely agree with you on that. That's something that I also realized a little bit later on, because when I first changed my diet, I was all, it's the food, but eventually I realized it's not just the food, and that relationships are super important and really key and crucial to our health. Well, thank you for being here, Michelle. If you want more from her, you can check her out at nomnompaleo.com or nomnompaleo across all the social channels, and I will also link to those in the show notes. Thanks for tuning in this week. If you enjoyed and got value from this episode, I'd be so grateful if you can take just 1 minute to leave an honest review on iTunes, as that will help us reach more people and get incredible guests on the show. To say thank you, email a screenshot of your review to info@mariamarlowe.com and we'll send you a free 3-day healthy eating sugar detox meal plan. After each and every episode, I encourage you to come say hi on Instagram at Maria Marlowe, that's MariaMarlowe, or in the private Happier and Healthier podcast group on Facebook. In both of these places, we can continue the conversation about today's episode, so come and share what you think. If you want more, you can also head to mariamarlowe.com, where you'll find tons of healthy recipes, meal plans, and resources to help you live your healthiest and happiest life. Lastly, if there's someone you know who'd enjoy this podcast, make their day, and mine, and send it to them now. Until next time, don't forget, health and happiness are a choice. Our thoughts become our reality, so make sure you're thinking up a masterpiece.